So pretty much let the people know who you are.
Fat Mike,
Where you from?
Southwest Philly.
No doubt, no doubt. So, first and foremost,
Mm-hmm.
I know who you are, and I'm
Right.
sure a lot of people know who you are already. So that was good to give you an introduction. However, like starting out in the game, who
Yeah,
was like some of your influences? That
Starting
made
out
influence?
in the streets, in the streets,
Mm-hmm.
my influence at the time, who I seen that was the people that I looked up to was people like, was Leonard, Black Leonard, Black Leonard, you know what I mean? L Boogie. His mother, Barbara, the Wizard, was my old head YY, Big Roachy. He was one of the dudes I looked at. Well, no, I'm not gonna say Big Roachy. I'm gonna say his brother Wayne. Those some of my people when I was coming up that I was, looking at, had my eyes.
Okay. You familiar with? Well, first and foremost, how you and Marquis meet?
Me and Marquise met. I used to go to this house party over the bridge, towards the 52nd Street Bridge, over towards like St. Bernard Street. I used to go to this house party, but we had just moved down 55th Street, and I used to go to this house party. I used to always encounter Marquis, AP, Tone Beth, and all of them at the house parties. And one night it was a little fisticuff in that joint, and I was deep in that shit because, at that particular point I had developed a friendship with Marquis and Aaron Porter and all of them. And one day we thought, I thought they was under attack. So I was on the attack, right? So, and that's how I met them. And from then, we just developed a strong friendship from there. Years, and to this day, we still friends. To this day. I still feel like I got that friendship within those individuals.
Oh, what about Marquis' brother?
Kev, I met Kev through Marquis. And at the time that I met him, I had no idea how he was supporting himself. I had no idea of what was going on. I just know that when he came around, he was fly, he drove some nice shit, and I ain't never seen him, I never seen him in a bad position. Although, yeah. So I met Kev through his Marquis, and at the time that I met Kev through Marquis, I had no idea of the caliber of dude that he was. I had no idea of that, right? I always knew Marquis' father, Georgie Boy, and his mom, Miss Sharon, to be, getting the money. I never knew Kev hid that. He didn't hide it, or what I want to say. Kev was, when he came through, I never had no idea of the caliber of dude he was until years later. That's when I found out the type of brother he was. But I knew him to be a good-hearted dude. And I found out he was getting the money. I was like, shit, Marquis' brother getting the money. And then I understood the kind of dude Marquis was, coming to the day. But, Yeah, Kev was a good dude. I really wish he was here today, man. You know.
The question I have, not to cut you off.
Mm-hmm.
What's your take on the '80s to now? Like, what's the difference? The '80s and the '90s leading up until now.
In my opinion, my take on the '80s to now, with different everybody.
The '80s, '90s, and now.
All right. In the '80s, it was everybody's getting to some nice money, everybody, but it was more loyalty. People was more loyal to each other, in my opinion, at that particular time. People had more respect for each other and more, love. You had some dudes that didn't have that type of relationship at that particular time. Yeah, the '80s was those days, in my opinion. Those was days. Yeah. And remember, little Ty was out there getting the money,
right.
and you was getting the money.
Right.
It was only two people
Let him
getting the money.
tell the story.
Like, I got
He
it.
tell that.
I got it.
And I was
It's already
around,
rolling.
he tell that.
It's rolling.
Well, okay, so in the '80s, I mean, there was some good dudes around in the '80s. There was a whole lot of good dudes, and there was a lot of people getting some nice money. A lot of us that was getting that money didn't know what to do with that money. So we was getting the money, fucking the money up, getting the money, fucking. However we was getting rid of the money, we was fucking the money up. Had we knew, I think a lot of us that are still around, had we knew about these days here and the climate and what's going on and what's the 2010, this is 2020, 2022. We would have put most of that money away. We would have did something with that money. You had some dudes that were smart enough to do something. They went into real estate, and some dudes that are around still doing okay. But yeah, man, the '80s was those days, man, and then you go into the '90s. In the '90s, I was pretty much locked up. I was in a penitentiary. My first state sentence, I did 12 and a half years on the 10 to 20 year sentence. 6 of those years I spent locked up in a hole. And anybody that been in the penitentiary, they know what I'm talking about when I say the hole. The restricted housing, RHU or whatever. But I did 6 of those years on disciplinary custody in the hole. And then I got out the hole. But I always tried to keep my ear close to the streets. And, like today, when you see all the shootings and the violence, I mean, you had those things back in the day. But it was about something. It was about some money. 90% of this shit that's going on today ain't about that. It's about some bullshit. It's about, the younger generation, in my opinion, following what they hear on records, out of rap songs or whatever. Really, if you really look at it, and you ever seen that PlayStation game, GS, what is it?
Grand Theft Auto.
Grand Theft Auto. That's what this is, man, out here today. Grand Theft Auto. This shit is crazy.
Except ain't no respawning.
Right, but at the end of the day, man, and these kids, they really playing with their life. They playing with their life, and they don't care nothing about life.
So what's your take on, and I'm sure your take should be pretty much like everybody else's sentiments. It's bullshit how these young kids is reacting today. But I want to know, what's your take with the drill music and the young cats talking about the dead and rolling them up and
smoking them and all
and
that,
shooting these innocent women and children.
Mm-hmm. My take is they crazy. They crazy and they going crazy because, and not only they telling on themselves, they do some shit and then they make a drill song about it. They telling on themselves, and it's just a crazy situation, man. Because it's hard to really, get into it with that situation, because I personally keep myself away from these young boys. But my take on it is that, man, it's a bad situation going on in the world.
What would be your solution?
Mm. My what would be my solution is that if you can talk to a younger person or a younger person is receptive towards uh, towards listening to you as as someone with more experience in life than them, then you put to try to talk to them and try to try to figure it out, because at the rate they moving crazy.
So let's rewind a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I want to tap back into y'all roots, the Southwest area.
Mm-hmm.
With Marquis
Mm-hmm.
and the family.
Right.
Pretty much who was, in that era at that stage,
right,
in that neighborhood, who was top dog?
I mean, you had in that era during Marquis era, because I was out there, right? But you had a lot of different dudes that was getting to the bag.
Well, who was getting the bigger bag?
That's hard to say, because I don't know if one person was getting more money than the next person. I can only say that I was around at that time, and it was a lot of people that was getting to some money. Like, it was a lot of people. One person. That's the difference between the day and those days. It's a lot of people at the time that was getting some money.
Well, specifically, let me ask you this: on 57th Street.
On 57th Street, right?
Who's
on 57th Street at that time, and when I was out, Marquis was getting the money, and Ty was getting the money from 57th Street, and that's one block. So you had two different dudes that was hustling on that same block. And there was no conflict, it was no problems, it was, but at some particular point, Ty fell off or whatever, and Marquis kept going. He kept going. And from at that particular time, when Marquis kept going, I had got incarcerated. So, but I can only know from what I heard, because Marquis and them was my friends and my homies. We all hung together. We all got money together. So, yeah, so that's what it was, man.
Okay. How was you introduced to Aaron Jones? And Lil Bucky?
Well, yeah, all right. At first, I used to, when, I was younger, me and my brothers, we used to live on 56 in Greenway. And when we were young, my father had me and my brother in the gym. So we used to go to a gym called Southwest Youth Center. And that's where a lot of people don't know. A lot of people do know. We boxed, me and my brother boxed in that gym for years. And Bucky was on we was part of that team, So I knew Bucky from back boxing from years ago. And I started boxing around about like 83, 80, maybe even longer than that. But I had a real good relationship with Buck from those days in the gym. We had a beautiful relationship. We used to train. We all went to fights and fought and all that. And Bucky was solid with his hands, So that's how I met Buck. We used to leave, after we left the gym, we would go around Bucky grandma's house on Upland Street, and his grandma would feed us. So, yeah.
Okay, well, what about Black Leonard? Like, tapping with him?
I always knew Leonard, as a young boy. Leonard used to hang on 54th Street with us. He used to mess with this girl named Puddin'. That was one of my sister Peanut girlfriend. And Leonard was always a dude that was getting some money. So I guess he had some type of problem going on at one of his places of business where he was getting the money at. And somebody said, "Man, shit, you ain't got to worry about that. Fat Mike just got out the youth study center. He was like, oh my God, boom, boom. Later on that night, somebody was knocking on my door, and I looked out the window. I seen Blue Volvo, and I thought it was his father, Lonnie Butler, but it was actually Leonard. And me and him had a conversation, and then he brought me right in the game. He brought me right in the game.
Well, again, for those who don't know, just we can tell the people it will be a part 2 with Mike, and y'all will be seeing him again.
Right.
In closing, what's some of the words you can give to one of these young kids that's pretty much might be lost and don't know what direction they want to go in? What would you tell them?
I would tell them, don't allow your emotions to master your manhood. These dudes will trick you right out your spot and have you sitting in somebody's penitentiary. You don't want to be sitting in nobody's penitentiary and sitting in somebody's hole for a couple of years, taking a shower for 2 minutes every 3 times a week. No mail, because people in the street will forget about you quickly. You'll still exist, but they'll forget about you, and ain't nobody got no time to be writing no letters. I got homies in the jail right now that I want to holler at, but I ain't got time to write no letter.